Can I start? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ICCCBE and CIB W78 2020 Virtual Joint Conference. This is the session 2B at YouTube channel B. The theme of this session will be BIM implementation, current status, and praxis. My name is Diana Costa. I'm from Federal University of Bahia, and I will be coordinating this session. So this session, we have 9 papers. The first part of this session has 5 papers. Then we have 15 minutes of discussion and more 4 papers in the end of this session. So the first presentation is an investigation of contractual requirements for BIM adoption in the Brazilian public sector. The presenter will be Douglas Malheiro de Brito. Thank you so much. Welcome, Douglas.
Oh, good afternoon, good evening, good morning for everyone. BIM adoption has been considered a complex process that involves so many critical success factors. Last year, Brazilian federal government launched a BIM strategy to implement, and despite Cassem and Succar reported unbalanced BIM diffusion areas. Next. And for that, the main objective of this study is to investigate which are the contractor requirements that influence BIM adoption process in public organizations. This study is part of a PhD thesis that I'm conducting in Federal University of Bahia, Brazil. The method adopted was divided in 5 steps. First, we conducted a literature review on contractual aspects that are influenced by BIM adoption, identifying the research problem. In the suggestion step, contractual aspects relate to development mandate, selection of project delivery systems, among others, were identified. And a digital questionnaire was developed on Google Docs, containing 5 questions on these contractual aspects. A pilot was conducted with 2 BIM experts in the development stage, and the evaluation occurred through a survey with a sample of 69 Brazilian professionals from the AEC sector. The analysis was based on determination of agreement percentages or degree of importance average in a 5-point Likert scale. The first aspect evaluated was the priority items to compose a mandate. Mandate is a prescriptive and mandatory document that guides BIM implementation. The results revealed that almost all 14 items were considered necessary by more than half of the respondents, with 5 of them being chosen at least about 70%, like interoperability, BIM execution plan, and others. Another contractual aspect evaluated is the criteria definition for selecting project delivery systems. For this, it was investigated which existing Brazilian public delivery systems for construction projects would have the greatest potential to maximize BIM benefits. The systems considered most appropriate are DCR, a type of design and build with variable remuneration for performance, and private-public partnership. Among the 4 requirements assessed through the degree of importance in a Likert scale, the highest averages were obtained by team qualification and professional experience in being used, and assessment of the quality of the deliverables in previous projects. The other requirements were also considered highly important, which indicates that they should not be discarded by public managers and can be evaluated as complementary criteria. The creation of objectivity criteria to assess the quality of BIM model is not only strategic for the initial contracting phase, but it is also during the design until the operation. The evaluation of the methods and tools that obtain the highest averages of importance have some degree of automation and support of validation software. Is the case of the top three requirements relating to overlapping or inconsistent objects and use of rules. Bearing in mind that the elaboration, maintenance, and updating of a specific BIM components library by a public organization is not a decision widely accepted by the Brazilian sector, professionals were questioned about the agreement with this issue. The results showed that just over half of professionals partially agree, while around 26% disagree and 19% agree totally. Among those who agree, even if only partially, 7 organizational factors were assessed in terms of degree of importance in generating a favorable cost benefit. The top 3 factors considered with the highest degrees of importance were existence of requirements for projects, modulation, and standardization, personal and technological infrastructure availability for development of the BIM library, and repeatability in project typology and specifications. These are the top 3 factors in average. So the main contribution of this research is providing a better understanding of these contractual aspects and to promote implementations that achieve the goals established by the public organizations. And for future research, it's recommended that these contractual requirements assessed can be investigated in the practice and their influence on the implementation process by public organizations. And we would like to thank you for your attention and for everyone who contribute with this research. And these are my contacts. Thank you so much.
So much, Douglas, for your presentation. We already have questions, so during the questions and answers, we will have a time for this. The next presentation is a proxy-based conceptual model on building information modeling, benefit realization. The presenter is Tyler Zomer. Thank you so much, Tyler. Have a great presentation.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler. I'm a PhD student at the Center for Digital Built Britain, University of Cambridge. And this paper looks at the relationship between BIM and improvements in project performance. Can you pass, please? And that's a very important topic, actually, because many countries around the world, as in the case of Brazil, for example, have established mandates for the compulsory implementation of BIM, such as here in the UK. Can you pass, please? But there have been many news, even in more mature countries like here in the UK, on BIM adoption and implementation, and the industry has claimed that BIM is still not business as usual yet, and many still don't see the benefits of adopting and implementing it. And then when you go to the academic literature, some very, very high-level scholars have also acknowledged that existing studies have focused on promoting the benefits of BIM as an outcome of the adoption in and of itself. Some scholars have noted that the literature needs to move from this normative perspective, and the studies on benefits realization need to be complemented with more practical-oriented approaches. So looking at practical implementation to understand how benefits can be realized. So then in this research, we take a practice-based lens from management literature to understand the implementation of new practices and the link with performance. And we adopt a micro-level lens to explore the conditions under which the benefits can be realized. By adopting a practice lens, we claim that the link between BIM implementation, so new technologies and information management process and activities, and the realization of benefits can only be understood if we consider the what, the how, and the who of implementation. So what has been implemented, how it has been implemented, and who is engaged with implementation. So to investigate practical implementation, I've done a range of case studies on BIM projects in the UK, and of course the UK, because UK is quite mature on the mandate, on this mandate and adoption of BIM. And I looked at practical implementation, which involves new technologies and information management process. I selected a sample of projects that were similar in terms of complexity and delivery approach, and projects for private sector and public sector client organizations. And I collected data using multiple sources of evidence. So I've done interviews with project stakeholders, including information managers, BIM managers. I analyzed the BIM documentation. I shadowed the project team members. I attended meetings, and that resulted in more than 2,000 pages of transcribed data. Then I analyzed this data using an inductive analytical approach, and I tried to reconstruct how implementation actually happened in practice. And I came up with a conceptual model linking the context, the practices that have been implemented, the what, the how of implementation, and the outcomes. And its model basically demonstrates that's not just a matter of adopting new technologies and standards and the prescriptive management process. But successful implementation requires a reconfiguration of existing structures. So in terms of what, the data shows that the new information management practices that are implemented are related to each other, and there is a relationship between these practices across the life cycle stages. And successful implementation can only be accomplished when all practices are implemented in a systemic way. In terms of who, the data showed that it's not only about developing new roles and responsibilities that emerge with a BIM project that we know, but it's also about changing the existing roles. So as, for example, the roles played by facilities managers. In terms of the how, the data showed that how project stakeholders perform these activities actually mediates the achievement of the envisaged outcomes. So there is a need for reconfiguration of the existing rule systems that shape how work happens in projects. And by rule systems, I mean reward and the cost structures, beliefs, bodies of knowledge, roles, expectations, as I said, power systems, authority systems, governance systems, and many other types of rules that shape, that are part of the industry and frame how work happens in projects. And that becomes even more complex because we have organizations working on these projects, and these organizations, they also have their own regimes, their own set of rules, which also need to be reconfigured, and then we have a new set of rules shaping work. So you need to read the paper to understand this. In terms of the contributions, this research contributes actually to both project management and BIM literature. So to project management literature in terms of the calls for more studies investigating the link between practice and project performance. And it adopts this theoretical lens from management literature and demonstrates that technologies and new process can only lead to improve performance if they are enacted properly. and by the right stakeholders. And it contributes to the BIM literature and the calls for more research examining the real world of implementation of BIM in organizations and projects, because there's lots of research done so far, but there have been calls for more practical analysis of practical implementation. And our findings account for the structural challenges related to implementation that should be considered when we exploring the conditions under which benefits can be realized. And we also offer new insights on why the benefits of BIM haven't been realized all the time, because it's an outcome of this symbolic implementation that happens in projects. Sometimes projects just implement new information management process and adopt new technologies and think that's just a matter of doing it without changing, actually really changing the way that they work. Thank you very much. That's all.
O seu microfone está desligado.
Sorry, thank you very much. Sorry, my apologies. My microphone was mute. So thank you very much, Tyler, for your presentation. Our next presenter is André Bormann. The title of the paper is Germany's Governmental BIM Initiative, the BIM for Infrastructure Infra 2020 project. André, if for some reason your presentation is not perfect, keep talking so we can understand a little bit about your work. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So hello everyone, my name is André Bormann. I'm professor for computational modeling and simulation at the Technical University of Munich. And I'm happy to present our paper titled Germany's Governmental BIM Initiative, the BIM for Infra 2020 project. First, a little bit of background. We all know that the BIM methodology has a large number of advantages over conventional paper-based practices. However, what we also know is that the AEC industry struggles to implement BIM by itself due to difficult boundary conditions it is facing, like heavy fragmentation, strong legal relationships, and so on. However, as the public is the most important client in many countries, the governmental initiatives play a major role in pushing forward the BIM adoption, both by fostering and demanding BIM. This is happening across the entire world with different speeds and also with different success, as we have seen in the previous slide. The slide before, please. We also have in Germany a governmental initiative, the German BIM roadmap. In 2015, the German government released the German BIM roadmap. It was actually released by the Ministry of Transport. It defines the mandatory usage of BIM methods in public infrastructure projects starting 2020. So this is special in Germany that we start with infrastructure before we implement BIM also for the house building sector. In any case, this was a very strong impulse for the entire German construction industry. So we now have way more companies that are capable to do BIM projects that we had a number of years ago. Next slide, please. The German BIM roadmap consists of 3 different phases. In phase 1, we started the first pilot projects. We started to have initiatives on standardization and education, and we started to discuss legal aspects. In phase 2, we then had more pilot projects, more experiences, and we started to write down the BIM guidelines. The second phase was from 2017 to 2020. And by the end of this year, we will enter phase 3, where we'll see a broad implementation of BIM, and BIM will then be the standard for new projects in infrastructure. Next slide. The BIM for Infra 2020 project was the major initiative of the second phase of the BIM roadmap. It was launched and funded by the Ministry of Transport to fill the gaps and prepare the BIM adoption in broad. It ran from 2017 to 2019, and this is the project I would like to report about today. It was performed by a consortium of universities, construction companies, planning companies, consultancy companies, and also lawyers. We had a number of tasks comprising a detailed definition of the BIM 2020 scenario, the guidance and analysis of a large set of BIM pilot projects, an in-depth legal analysis of the boundary conditions to perform BIM, and the development of guidelines, templates, and recommendations for the public authorities. In addition, we also developed a database concept for the upcoming BIM cloud. Next slide, please. One of the most important tasks was to define the BIM 2020 scenario. The government wanted us to define 3 different scenarios with different effort, but also with different benefit. So we defined an entry, a race, and a high performance scenario. All 3 of them are realizable from 2020 on, and all of them fulfill also the minimum requirements set by the German government through its BIM roadmap. Next slide, please. For defining these different scenarios, we followed the following methodological approach. We defined a core of boundary conditions, including, for example, vendor-neutral data exchange. We require employers' information requirements, a BIM execution plan. We have certain aspects related to tendering processes. We have a common data environment, and so on and so forth. So this core is stable across the different scenarios. However, the use cases that are implemented in the different scenarios differ from scenario to scenario. Next slide, please. So we defined 20 standard use cases, ranging from initial state modeling over coordination, safety design, building, up to operation and maintenance. You can find all these use cases and detailed descriptions of these use cases in our report that is published on www.bimforinfra.de. Next slide. For all these different use cases, we had leading German BIM experts assess both the effort and the benefits of these use cases. You can see in this table here that we have the weighted effort. We see also the benefit, and we see the benefit effort ratio that has been calculated through the effort and the benefit. With high numbers, meaning a better benefit effort ratio, lower numbers, meaning a worse ratio. The green ones are the best ones, so we clustered them into the entry scenario, the yellow ones into the race scenario, and the red ones with the poorest benefit effort ratio into the performance scenario. Next slide, please. On this slide, you see how the different scenarios can be clustered. Again, you see horizontally the effort, vertically the benefit. On the left upper part, you see those use cases that have a low effort and a high benefit. Accordingly, they are in the entry scenario. In the middle, you see the race scenario, and in the lower part, you see the high performance scenario. So this was the basis that we provided for the Ministry of Transport for performing a decision. And the ministry has decided to demand the entry scenario by the end of this year. The race scenario will then be demanded by 2023, and the high performance scenario, including all use cases, will be demanded by 2025. Next slide, please. The scenario definitions were based on the support and the analysis of a large number of BIM pilot projects that you can see here on this slide. They included bridge projects, road projects, but also water gate projects, all projects that are in the infrastructure domain. In these different projects, different use cases have been implemented. The projects have been supported and guided by our project BIM for Infra 2020, and the gathered experiences have been documented and formed the basis for the BIM for Infra guidelines that we developed that are on the next slide, please. So these guidelines are maybe the most important output of our project. They consist of 200 pages in total, very detailed guidelines to be used by both the authorities, the clients, but also the planning offices and the construction offices. They range from principles and the overall process over BIM contracts until the technologies to be used in the BIM context. Next slide, please. Apart from that, we also developed a database concept, also called the BIM Cloud, that is now put into place. So it's really now implemented and will be launched very soon. It's consisting of a classification system, a central property server, and an employees information requirements database where you can configure your EIR templates and you can include or exclude use cases however you want it to be in your project. A detailed report again is available on our website, 2020 project laid quite successfully the foundations for BIM adoption at large in Germany. Next guidelines we have developed are available on our website. So you are free to visit our website. You can download all the papers and reports and guidelines we have developed. Most of them are in German, but some also in English. So I invite you very much to visit the website. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for your presentation. Very interesting. People who is watching, please, if you have any question, please put in the chat #2B and the number of the presentation. So the next presenter is Eduardo Isato. The name of the paper is an IFC representation for process-based cost modeling. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Have a great presentation.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Eduardo Isato, so I'll present the paper on IFC representation for process-based cost modeling. I'd like to start, next slide, please. Next slide, please. I'd like to start by pointing out that a cost estimate is critical, not just for planning the cost, but also for controlling and monitoring the costs. So BIM has proven to be a very effective approach for cost estimating because it's faster, it's more reliable than manual QTO, and also the quantities are kept in pace with the models. How this is done? Because quantities are derived from the objects used with assemblies, recipes, or external database. So cost and data calculations performed completely outside the BIM model and not inside it. So the problem is that product-based cost models are structured to represent building components or finished buildings, and then concern more on ends than on means. So they are not quite appropriate to control the progress, the cost in the progress of the project. It's a case of the process-based cost models, because construction projects are unique, but most of the processes are not. Thus, I toyed with the idea of how to embed the process-based cost data into the IFC model. So this paper is about this question. So next slide, please. To do this, in order to embed this information inside the IFC file, we have to devise a conceptual framework, how to model the costs, and also how to represent those costs in terms of IF entities. So next slide. The research approach is straightforward. So I just mentioned that the first two steps are target to this conceptual framework and to propose a representation. The other four to test this, simulating with a real IFC file, trying to write information and extend the IFC file. So the conceptual framework is that tasks are means to achieve the desired product, and then there are means and there are intermediates that use resources, and processes may be understood as task patterns. So tasks that repeat. You see here the flow of the costs from resources to processes and then to tasks and products. So one point that is important here is that process-based costing requires that the task structure, the WBS, is to be defined beforehand. In terms of literature about using IFC, most of the studies map costs to IFC objects and rely on product model, very few on process models. So the problem is how to represent this resource and their costs as processes. And amazingly, most of the entities that we need to do this are already in place in IFC4. So it was just a matter to choose, and the more important here is to model processes as IFC task types. So this will do the same as task patterns. The first part of the diagram that shows the slide is how you derive the costs and physical quantities of the resources to the IFC task type that is basically an IFC process. So a process of, excuse me. So those elements then make possible to calculate the cost of the process. And then you have other entities that are used to transfer the cost from the processes to the tasks and then to the products or components or assemblies inside the building model. And you see here the diagram where this is done. And I separated this in two diagrams because the first diagram can be, for example, a library. So, but in this case, I tried to use both at the same file. So in this case, this cost can be allocated if I want to the file FC file. The case selected for test purposes are IFC file chosen among well-documented examples of IFC OpenShell. That's a simple wall. And also the process-based cost composition is the one that I showed in a few slides before. So here you have a snippet of the Python script used to extend the IFC file, the IFC wall file, to include process-based cost data and also the tasks that well organized. So here you see an excerpt of the original IFC file that was extended from entity 128 on with additional data from the process-based cost data and tasks. After that, this IFC file was read using another script and then calculated the cost. And here you can see that the difference is very small between the original cost and the calculated one, and mostly due to round logic. So it was demonstrated that it's possible to embed process-based cost compositions into the BIM model and not just changing, but extending the IFC. This was interesting to extend the product to project management in the BIM and also to provide some good integration among cost objects, products, elements, and tasks. Also, a strong compatibility between different software can be achieved, and the idea of aggregating cost information to be consolidated into the federated IFC model is important. And this process data can be stored as process libraries in the project or even public one. So this was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isato, for your presentation. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the fifth presentation, so I would like to invite all the presenters to be here, and then we can start questions and answers. I recommend everybody to make questions in the YouTube channel. But we already have some questions. I'm very happy about this session. So the first three presentations, we could see BIM implementation in Brazil, in the UK, and in Germany. So I think there are plenty of questions about this for you presenters. So the first question that we have, Ricardo Codinhoto, He's asking about, is the mandate only for public projects, like in the UK, or for both private and public projects? If only public project, how the Brazilian private sector is engaging with BIM comparatively? So this is for you, Douglas.
Thank you for the question. Mandates are usually mandatory for project responsibility of each organization. In this case, for public projects of a particular sphere and typology of a Brazilian public organization. The private sector is adopting some actions and realizing that is beneficial for your projects, for their projects, but public initiative is very important, and Brazil demanding this action.
Okay, thank you so much, Douglas. We have another question, Ricardo Cognoto again, my friend. So he asks Tyler, how benefit realization is different from tangible and intangible return on investment?
Oh, thank you for the question. So actually, we were talking about benefits realization from a project perspective, and actually the main purpose of implementing new information management process and activities as prescribed by these standards, and also using new technologies, is to reduce waste. So you reduce minimize the production of information that's wasteful and excessive information, and then we've got cost reduction and time savings and other project performance improvements. And this actually the goal of this paper wasn't to talk about any specific benefits, cost reduction or time savings or anything, was just to show that it's not just about adopting new technologies or implementing standards, because what we observed was that in practice, many projects implement what has been called BIM Level 2, because it in the UK changed now to BIM framework, and then they don't realize the benefits. And then the question is why, that's because it's not just about using a software or using a design tool that you see those benefits. It's about changing the way that you work, and that involves changing actually the framing of your work, not just implementing a standard or developing an information requirements or developing a BIM execution plan for the sake of doing it. It's doing it in a proper way, in a completely different way, considering that what you're going to deliver is not the physical asset, but an information model at the end of the project as well. And then for that asset information model, you have other clients that need to be part of the process. So the goal was to show, actually, if you want to understand how benefits can be realized, we need to look at what has been implemented, how things have been implemented, and who is involved in this implementation. Otherwise, projects would be like faking implementation, and then they claim that they don't see the benefits. And that's the reason, because implementation actually hasn't happened as envisaged by policy makers. And yeah, that's
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tyler. I think your work is very interesting and show that we have a lot to learn. Even in a mature country like the UK, we are seeing a difference between what is the mandate, what is required by the government, and what the companies are really implementing because of several factors. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
We have another question. Okay, there is another comment from Jacob. It's looking forward to the property server. Would you like to comment something about this, Tyler?
What do you mean actually? I didn't get
yeah, I didn't too, but okay. We have another question now for Eduardo Isato. To what extent this approach is dependent on the quality of the model? For example, it's difficult to extract area and volume of plaster for indoor walls?
No, the idea is exactly to use this approach for different kinds of LOD. The idea is to integrate this with the lean construction approach, that is to define tasks progressively. So the problem is, this is the point for another article, was that the idea is exactly to have a kind of WBS that is not programming or scheduling the activities, but just defining the activities, and to define progressively these activities as long as you go doing the detailing of the model, may I say, or a better definition. So the idea is not to have how can I say, a model that is ready, complete, but to improve the quality of the model and also the quality of the planning along the time.
There is another question complementing this. Does the approach comes with some sort of guidelines for modeling? Isato?
No, this is something that is have to be tested by use.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Andre, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your presentation about the German implementation Infra 2020. So I would like to know your opinion about the implementation in Germany and the other two implementations that we saw here in the UK and in Brazil. Do you feel that in Germany you are the public sector and the private sector are ahead of us or ahead of Brazil, for example? What do you recommend to advance or to have a kind of first learning in this implementation?
Well, I would not say that we are ahead. I would say that Germany took a very, I would say, careful approach to the BIM implementation. So what we saw in other countries, in the US, but also in the UK, where companies, but also authorities just try new things and then they establish and they learn by doing and they accept mistakes. Doing that, it was not really possible in Germany, to be honest. So we really had to develop a really profound framework and very detailed guidelines and recommendations before now the authorities are really capable to do BIM projects, because they really wanted to have this guidance. And well, I don't have a very detailed insight into the Brazilian sector, but maybe this is what I would recommend, that you do more or less both, like do pilot projects, do try new things, but at the same time, I also think it is very helpful for people that are not maybe very deep in BIM technology and all these BIM aspects. They really need the guidance, they need the help, they need support. And well, we have to provide it to them to make them capable to do the project. So that would be what I would recommend it. Developing guidelines really helps, and we can see now much more acceptance of the new technology than we had 5 years ago, where, well, we had it in universities and there were a lot of studies and these kind of things. But practitioners were like, really, oh, leave me alone. I don't want to use models. I want to stick to my drawings. This has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. And we are now on a good track. But I would not say that we are very much ahead of Brazil. We are a little bit behind UK, certainly also behind US, but well, not too far, I would say.
Okay, thank you so much, Andre. We have another question for you, Tyler. How do you view your framework being applied, driving BAPs and BIPs?
Yeah, actually, the purpose of this research was to provide some feedback at the policy level, you know, for next standards in terms of how standards should prescribe things in a way that implementation doesn't vary that much between projects, because the construction sector has a very particular way of doing things, and those things like have been institutionalized for a long time already. So sometimes there is this disconnection between policymakers and those implementing things in practice. And although the policy making process is more collaborative nowadays, even though it's not that obvious, you know, so there are differences in interpretation of how process should be implemented. And then that leads to an implementation that actually is not as envisaged. So the goal of this research was actually to provide some feedback. We analyzed how projects respond to mandates, and then this is going to feed back to at a policy level how new standards should be developed. And so for sure there would be more recommendations in terms of how to design guidelines on what is expected in a BIM execution plan, what is expected in employer information requirements, you know, because at the moment is prescriptive in terms of what to do, but not how to do. And then it happens, the implementation happens as it has been done for other things. For example, when you are designing an employee information requirements, is specifying the information requirements needed for the delivery of an information model at the end. Usually in construction, how do we do that? We appoint someone, a consultant, to design that, you know, to specify everything. So the client usually appoints someone else. But in this case, you are delivering something to a new client, so the ones operating the asset. So those are the clients in this new process as well, and they need to be involved. So it's a different way of specifying requirements, but the industry is doing a new thing following all the old ways of doing. So, and that's not very much, it's not explicit when you are actually doing it in practice, you know. So that's the goal was to understand how practical implementation has happened, and then we could feedback to policymakers.
Okay, thank you so much, Tyler. We have some more questions for Douglas. The level of adoption, the BIM level adoption is the same in Brazil public institution as the private ones? Do you believe that the BIM mandate is being effective for the public adoption here in Brazil?
Thank you, Cristina. The level of adoption has been higher in the private sector due to the expected benefits, but it's a disintegrated use, and the benefits is limited. In relation to public mandates, the Brazilian government published a BIM implementation strategy, establishing some projects that should adopt BIM for each typology of organization and related to life cycle stage. For example, in 2021, BIM for design, and 2024 for construction, and 2028 for operation. However, there is lack of mandates and BIM execution plan adapted to each organization. It's there is a lack of document.
Okay, we have one last question, so we can finish this first part and then start the second one. It's for you, Eduardo Isato. Would it be interesting to link these aspects of the budgets with the classification proposed by ABNT 15695? Can you comment about this? Isato? Are you with us?
I've been, but yes, are you okay? Of course, we are already doing it.
Okay.
We are already doing it. Of course, it's quite important.
Okay. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Well, I think we had a great first part of the session. I would like to thank you very much, Douglas, Andre, Tyler, and Eduardo Isato for this fantastic slot of presentation. If you have any doubt, please access the YouTube. All the sessions will be recorded. Thank you so much. Let's start the second part.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's start the second part of our session. So we have another presentation concerning being in Latin America countries, an analysis of regulation evolution. I would like to invite Fernanda Machado for this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana. Hi, everyone. My name is Fernanda Machado. I'm from University of Campinas, and it's a pleasure to be here and be able to present this study, right? That approach, as Diana said, being Latin American countries. And its study was developed in partnership with Joyce Della Torre from University of São Paulo and Regina Rochel from University of Campinas. So governments and nonprofit institutions have stimulated digital transformation through ICTs, macro-adoption initiatives, and being a trend for construction industry, and has the government support and the leadership as a critical driver. So, such initiatives at macro scale vary from territory to territory. And macro adoptions, the implementation and diffusion of BEM within a country or across countries, there is a lack of previous studies that about macro adoption focusing on Latin America region, which available information is dispersed and composed by overviews and market perception, which means that there is a demand for exploring the recent movement of BEM macro adoption in Latin American countries, and also positioning BEM initiatives from these countries in the context of the economic region. So the aim of this study is to map and analyze BEM macro adoption initiatives in Latin America, both by covering the leading public sector roles of each country and investigating what is the current state of macro adoption in the region and its evolution in the last 15 years. So this is about an exploratory study based on a survey on documentation, right? And this survey ranged from 2005 to 2019, and 18 Latin American countries that integrate FIIC were analyzed. FIIC is the non-profit Inter-American Construction Industry Federation, and it's composed by countries related to chambers and companies. The search is, next slide, please. I don't know what happened here. For some reason, okay. So as I said, 18 Latin American countries integrate the FIIC, right? And we analyzed all of them. And FIIC is the non-profit Inter-American Construction Industry Federation, and is composed by countries-related chambers, federations, and companies. So this search strategy comprises specific requirements to collect accessible documents available in official websites of governments, national standard institutions, chambers, and so on. Then we organize a data surveyed in graphics for classification and also analysis. And now presented the results. 80 countries are active members of the BEM network of Latin governments. We also observe the presence of BEM Forum Latam, launched by FIIC, in chambers' roles as co-founders of the regional BEM forums. And besides, we highlight that Latin countries have been influenced by UK regarding all the BEM strategies, right? So in this slide, we can see efforts from governments and market aligned, aimed at accelerating this macro adoption, mainly in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Mexico, Peru, and so on. And countries that are members of this network and have a BIM forum highlight such alignments. In the integrated analysis by country, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Mexico have national strategies for BIM implementation. The case of Chile, these requirements are already running. And in Brazil, beyond the active role by government, we see efforts in multiple instances. Since 2018, we can see recent efforts and official publications from Colombia, Peru, and Uruguay regarding macro adoption. And one highlight is the Colombian case that where documentation has a detailed project-based content to drive industry. So it's a complete content. Costa Rica and Panama are starting their paths to macro adoption with an active role from their chambers and BIM forums. And Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Uruguay have chambers and BIM forums or BIM forums that are relevant in publishing content for guiding industry. So there are publications in terms of macro adoption in Latin America since 2010. From 2016 on, there has been a growth movement towards BIM macro adoption in Latin America. Between 2015 and 16, this period is aligned to the first memorandums between UK and Latin countries. And there are also a greater volume of publications from Latin America belonging to Brazil. There is also a pioneer, and most of it is classified as mandates, and Chile takes the second place in this context. In addition to them, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, and Uruguay also own mandates. The path of initially creating protocols in origin in this graphic is identified in Brazil, for instance, with ABNT standards, followed by Mexico and Peru. This category emerged first, and then Chile contributed by publishing mandates that require BIM usage in public projects in gray, and more recently, guides were published by countries. So as considerations, UK has great influence on macro adoption of BIM in Latin America through CDBB program, the MU signed by UK and Chile, Brazil, and Mexico, and also through collaboration workshops approach with Colombia, Uruguay, and Peru. In a collaborative effort, Chile brought the issue of creating a BIM network of Latin governments together with those entities, right? FIC, CDBB, with the support of BID. And the Latin network includes 8 countries as members with governments in active roles for benchmarking and strategy development. Considering the leadership, Brazil is a pioneer, and Chile, and also Chile, have the greatest expression in terms of BIM documentation and project-based content. Countries such as Mexico, Argentina, Peru, Uruguay, and Colombia had later expertise and were involved by the network. In terms of evolution in each country, even though the region has common efforts, we had different dynamics, ranging from multiple initiatives to centralized approach. And for instance, Colombia has few official publications, however, with a higher maturity content to drive industry. A great number of documents analyzed focused on conceptual approach and initial steps of the implementation. In countries with mandates, in more complete protocols or guides, have greater potential for success in adopting BIM. And this is the case, for example, of Chile, Brazil, and Colombia. So thank you. I recommend that you all read this article because it has detailed information about each country. And thank you for your attention and time.
Thank you so much, Fernanda. This is a very interesting overview about being in Latin America. So thank you so much for this. The next presentation will be challenges of district information modeling, DIM, applied for heritage preservation. I would like to invite Eloisa Dazen-Kapter for this presentation. Thank you so much, Eloisa.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Eloisa Dazen-Kapter, assistant professor at the University of Campinas. Today in this presentation, I would like to talk about the challenges of district information modeling applied for heritage preservation. Let's talk about the results of a post-grad summer course taken in last year in my university. The main purpose of the course was to work with AGD as an innovative and more efficient way for the management of historical sites, aiming at the integration of AGB and the GIS. The steps taken in this direction can be seen in this flow. Research showed that the integration of GIS and BIM deals with numerous challenges. To address these challenges, efforts include the conversion, translation, and extension of existing standards that work as a bridge between BIM and GIS. To fill this gap, Liu and colleagues proposed the different levels of integration and parameter criteria based on data, process, and application. In this study, we use the application-focused methods. This option took into account the backgrounds of our students in this course and the intended learning in the time that we have. We have a very short course, a summer course with 2 weeks. Application-focused meant to work specific use. In other words, the information loss depends on the individual case. Although it has a low degree of openness and flexibility, the efforts expressed in time, work, and money involved in this method are low. Said and Raymondini highlighted that application of GIS and BIM targeting integration of heritage management include 3 dimensions. The first is segmentation, the second is structure of the hierarchical relationships, and the third is semantic enrichment. Yeah, we choose as a site for our approach. The Monte Alegre district is a former industrial area in the city of Piracicaba in São Paulo. Its regional historical relevance is due to the culture of sugarcane and sugar and alcohol production. As you can see in this picture of the 1940s, the area was organized around the sugar mill. The more than 900 dwellings are grouped in villas, and the more significant buildings well preserved are the chapel of San Pedro and the school that are nominated for preservation by the State Council in Heritage Defense. For the reality digital model, almost 2,300 pictures were acquired in 2 surveys campaigns. We used 2 different RPAS, as well. A third campaign was taken to digitalize the main buildings of the site. Here we can see in this slide the images processed, by Agisoft Metashape, where 23 millions of 3D coordinates and RGB texture were generated. The orthophoto plus the shapefile of blocks and plots allow the vectoring of the building projection and the indexing of attributes. Thematic maps were generated with the historical evolution, building's conservation status, and characterization degree. A different dimension of object characterization regards not only its geometric accuracy, but also reliable information defining the scope, purpose, and the complexity of a 3D knowledge-based model, as we can see here in different LODs. Based on CIT-GML LOD1, the geometric model of the district was developed from the vector maps and the point clouds. It was important we have software. The model of the Villa Eloisa was developed in LOD3, detailed exterior, and the others were developed in LOD4, detailed interior and exterior. Here we see in the slide the chapel, the process for scan to HB. She was digitalized, the interior was digitalized with different sensors from professional cameras and mobile cameras, resulting in almost 500 pictures. The school was digitalized only the exterior, since the interior has undergone a little change over the years. The other building from the site, from the district, were modeled in LOD1 with a mass creation tool. As shared parameters were used to define buildings' historical information like state of conservation, classes of use, degree of characterization. We can see here in this slide the process and the shared parameters on the left, sorry. As you can see here in the slide, the color yellow represents a residential class of use and the orange commercial. The most significant buildings on site like Villa Luisa, the school, and the Villa Josefina were developed in LOD 3 and 4. This was a collaborative work in which each student has developed a building model that has been added to the district model. For the lessons learned, we can see that the scan step of this study was very important because it gives us the data specialization and it could be worked in the GIS platform in the BIM environment. From GIS, we understand the district and its surrounds. Then we can use it and manage the attributes to make thematic maps. And the BIM is for the creation of component-based structured 3D semantic models. In conclusion, from this study, we see that the lack of interoperability between software hampers the integration of BIM and GIS platform. And exporting the georeference mapping from GIS platform to the DXF formats, we have a loss of the attributes. Okay, thank you for being with me in my presentation. I would be happy to take any question that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eloisa, for this very interesting presentation. Our next presenter is Johan Luton. His paper is an approach for data extraction, validation, and correction using geometrical algorithm and model view definition on BIM models. Thank you, Johan.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Johan Lutin, a software developer working for ICCCBE, a software development company with Thomas Cryan, who is the founder, also the maintainer of IFC OpenShell, the open source library for reading and writing IFC, and also researcher at Delft University of Technology. Next slide, please. So a little outline. First, I will be introducing the current challenges for the adoption of BIM. Then I will give some background on the IFC and MVD XML formats, followed by our contribution. So use MVDs as extraction units in Python, high-level programming language. And we will discuss the results and conclude. So information is how to retrieve from detailed IFC models. Indeed, you need IFC proficiency, some programming skills, and there is also another problem is that a lot of models in the industry are not correct. They are missing data or wrong data, so they lose all their utility. The IFC format enables to model a construction project. This is a very rich format. You can have little data, like the name of the material of a building element, some geometrical description, and we thought about one interesting use case, which would be the extraction of the surface of the facade of a building. So for that, we can use the MVD XML format, which enables to define a subset of an IFC file, and which also attempts to make IFC easier by filtering information. On the bottom right, you can see the path going from an IFC world instance to the isExternal property of this world. So MVD XML format allows for a formalization of the structure of the IFC data. It imposes rules on the data, and it is currently more used about for checking the IFC structure in itself than the model regarding to the building code, for example. So currently it is used through different methods in different checking systems. But there are tentatives to integrate the end users in the earliest phases to be involved in this framework. Something good is that MVDs are reusable. So partial conclusion, MVDs can be used for data checking, geometry checking to some extent, and they are quite simple to edit an IFC doc, for example, and reusable. But they are not used enough to simply extract data. They are using at first to check before all, rather than extracting. So our contribution is quite simple. We implemented an open source software which is able to extract and filter data from an IFC model. So what you can see on this screen is a chain of concepts, and each concept will enable to extract a certain piece of information from a model. Here in more detail, I presented it earlier. This is the MVD tree, as we call it, to extract the isexternal property of a wall. So you can see the path we have to traverse in order to get this information. And we are waiting for a certain structure in the data. So this is the recursive algorithm we use to extract the data. So as input, we take an IFC file and its instances, plus some MVD trees, and we go along recursively along the nodes until we get the value, and then it will be combined into some data structure. To show you the flows of Beam, you can see an IFC OpenShell Python script which outputs the same number of external walls as the total number of walls. And this is a model from the industry, and it shows that the walls haven't been classified. So to correct that, we can use some geometrical algorithms thanks to the embedded definition of geometry in IFC. And we simply, just to show it, we put that an external wall is a wall that is not, which is in contact with only one space. And this is the result, which looks quite good, but maybe you can see the little pieces which are not walls. They are not walls, but they have been considered as walls, external walls, because they are marked as IFC wall type in the model. This is the output we can get from the Python module, so a spreadsheet output, and it is from the famous IFC duplex open source duplex file. You can see that we've summed up the outer area of these walls, which answers to our goal. But we cannot trust the information in models. In this duplex file, for example, on the first floor, you can see this big load-bearing wall, which is classified as external, but it's obviously not. So we had to correct it with our algorithm, and then we can reuse the MVD extraction. So we wanted to outline the importance of data extraction. Any validation requires a phase of data extraction. We enable a formal and shareable use of extraction units in the form of MVDs. And we wanted to make IFCs and MVDs more accessible to practitioners, showing this domain use case. The discussion, you only get what the model contains, even if your extraction is perfect. You can use, however, the geometrical algorithms to correct the data, and then you can use it to validate the data. Say, I want to extract only the external walls, but you would need some different type of validation levels. For example, first, we come up with the idea that we should validate the intrinsic nature of building elements, IFC types. This element is an IFC beam, is a beam, or is a wall. Then we can validate the data structure, and eventually we will be able to validate the building project. So the issues where in the industry, many of the models are made of errors. MVDs rely upon a project-based organization, and the end user often cannot use the IFC data in an independent way. They are using a black box viewer, for example, viewer software. Our contribution is available in open source on GitHub. We wanted to show how simple a query could be translated and used by practitioners. And we saw all the problems, the inherent problems of wrong models in the industry. For further work, we wanted to validate the types in particular. Thank you for...
Thank you so much, Johan, for your presentation. We have one last presentation for this session. I would like to invite all the attendees to make questions Remember, you can put hashtag, the name, the number of the presentation, and make questions, because after this presentation, we will have our discussion, okay? So our last presentation is titled Management Procedures for Sensitive Project in the Context of BIM Adoption in a Public Organization. So I would like to invite Giuseppe Micelli Jr. for his presentation. Thank you very much, Giuseppe.
Thank you, Professor Diana Costa. Good afternoon. I'm from Military Institute of Engineering, and I'm going to present to you the paper with the title described, which was part of my PhD thesis. For that purpose, I'll start off by making a few observations about the research objective. Then I'll talk about the literature review and obtaining results, highlighting the artifact development and its application. I'll then conclude by highlighting the main remarks about the results. So the objective of this work is to develop a management procedure in the context of a BIM adoption in a Brazilian public organization, which must contemplate some specific requirements: information security, submission to public compliance, and specific project conditions. We then proposed a triaxial framework to guide BIM adoption in public organizations. It is divided in 3 groups. The first one is the model management actions related to BIM model, uses and specifications, along with the adoption and implementation effort in organizations. Most of these actions are already well described in international standards. The second group is the product management actions related to product adequacy to client technical specifications and compliance with deadlines, scope, and costs. It is directly related to the design process itself and its evolution through time. The third group is the governance management actions, because BIM adoption processes must obey public governance management rules for actions like project supervision, hiring design staff, and purchasing of the necessary software and hardware. So this research was aimed at the Public Design Office, which develops security and national defense installations and facilities. So according to British and international standards, security-oriented design processes became necessary and then mandatory. So the artifact comprised 3 constructs. First, a framework with global process sequence, a description of all processes in the framework, and then a set of task charts, each one corresponding to each process. Here is talking about the procedure framework, represented here in a simplest way, divided in colors, in colored boxes: green, blue, gray, and brown, corresponding to all 3 management groups and security issues in BIM models. So in this slide, in the following ones, I'll try to detail a little bit more this proposed framework. Each processes was subdivided into narrowest processes which are related to each other in a certain sequence. Like the example showed here, with organizational security in gray and BIM implementation guidelines in green. So detailing these processes, they are then best described into simpler tasks. Here is represented the task chart of organizational BIM implementation guidelines, an adaptation of the initial activities of the national standard applied to these organizations. In another way, there is also the processes and the task charts of the corresponding organizational security measures, an adaptation from British international standard directives to this organization. So, speaking about this experiment, the artifact, it took over in a design office specializing in development of projects destined to military use, so that some organizational security-oriented routines were also analyzed. The artifact, it was a design with about 20,000 square meters. So auto processes and the test charts created have had their applicability evaluated, being them classified in 4 categories: not applicable, not relevant, very relevant, and totally applicable. Regarding the product management actions, they were in general well known, established inside design ops. However, other phases like design, development, and its supervision are still under development and were not analyzed in this paper. Governance management actions, speaking of them, they were totally applied because of the necessary compatibility to rigid governance rules for hiring and bidding phases along the project process inside the organization. Here, I'm citing only 2 of these processes. So regarding the model management actions, they have had almost total applications, process, and tests. However, it was necessary to separate those processes, this destiny to organizational being guidelines and the local being bonds, in a partial correspondence with the international standard design phases. There are also some difficulties related to the understanding and application of security-minded BIM processes, with very few contributions to BIM implementations and execution plans, BIM and BEPS. Jumping to the conclusions, we can consider there are triaxial framework with 3 management groups exist, where each one has a broad relationship with each other. So BIM processes must necessarily consider organizational and internal guidelines of the organization to have a more chance of success. However, if security-minded processes are involved, BIM processes must consider these guidelines. I'd like then to thank your attention and appreciation. That's all. Good afternoon. Your speaker. I'm not here.
Hello. Thank you very much, Giuseppe, and all the presenters. Now we can start our questions and answers. We already have some, and then we can understand a little bit more about the presentations and the works. So first question, I would like to ask Johan. So there is one here. Thank you, Johan. Very interesting work. How do we envision the modularization of rules and their reuse? What is the kind of data practitioners need to find, apply, modify, and republish it? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. I would say that for the modularization, you can already modularize your rules with the MVD XML format. You can indeed have several concept templates and use different concepts such as the name of an entity instance or is external property of an IFC world with all the paths that I showed. Regarding really the reuse, what could be useful would be a user interface, a web user interface where you could apply in chain those different concepts and just like doing drag and drops with boxes and the different concepts. And then you could choose, you could decide to make a concept a filtering one or just an extractive one. For example, there would be an extractive concept that would say, I want only the external walls of this file, or you could say, I want all the answers. I want to know for every wall whether they are external or not.
There is another data. Yeah, okay, sorry. Go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
Regarding the data that the practitioners could need, I'm going to give a little experience. I was working for a facility, for housing company, the facility management department, and the queries were quite simple, like the surface of the external walls, because there will be a renovation project, and we just want to estimate the cost of the reinsulation and maybe the painting. Or in the headquarter building of our company, we want to know the number of flights, and in a 3,000 square meters building, it's quite huge. So this kind of data, but they are not accessible if you don't have the right thing in your model.
Okay. We have another question for you, Jacob. He's asking about the skill set. What skill sets and knowledge do future engineers and practitioners need?
I would say programming is quite useful, especially if we want to develop the use of open standards. And if you want to be the master of our data, I would say that IFC OpenShell is the perfect library. It's accessible. It's in Python, so it's a very you can get into it without too much difficulties. For the knowledge, I would say some general technological knowledge, in addition to knowing the constraints of the management of construction project. So yes, IT knowledge would be knowing the size of a model, how much space you would need, how much computer resources you would need to read it or write a new one. So yeah.
Yes, definitely. I agree with you. So we have another question for Fernanda. Douglas Brito, very interesting investigation, Fernanda. Could you highlight an aspect that beginners could be inspired by the adoption of Chile?
Okay, thanks, Douglas. Actually, now beginners have a safe space, right, to start BIM adoption because of the BIM network, BIM Latam network for governments that offers this space for benchmarking and trade-off experience between countries here in Latin America. So it's a good start. But talking about Chile, Chile had a different dynamic in comparison, for example, to Brazil, because they had a centralized effort, right, in plumbing. So it's rushed the process in Chile. Here we have so many efforts that is spread in our country, and now with the government leading this BIM BR strategy, things are coming closer, right? And so we are trying to align with ABNT. We are trying to align with some efforts from in the state area. So I think that Chile had this centralized effort concerning the plumbing that helped to create all this regulatory framework and content, and that's great. But now I think that the BIM network of Latam is a great place to beginners just come and trade experience, exchange experience.
Thank you, Fernanda. Let's keep doing with another question. Christiane, she asked about maturity. There is, in your research, an analysis of the country maturity. If so, what was the criteria used? And of course, congratulations for your presentation.
Oh, okay, thanks. Not maturity. We can talk about a lens of maturity, because what we did was a survey based on documentation, right? So we analyzed documentation and talking about the BIM knowledge content, the BKC. There is a concept from Sucre developed this. We analyzed content from this documentation to establish some analysis about how this influence both the markets, right, and the public sector. So I cannot say that is a maturity analysis. It's the lens is more about documentation. In this lens, we can say that Brazil is the leader in terms of worrying about publishing standards, right? And now on, since 2015, is structuring a path to regulate this in public sector. So it's not about the maturity in whole, because there's so many laces.
Okay. Thank you, Fernanda. Let me ask something to Heloisa. I like very much your work. I think I had an opportunity this year to visit before everything, to go to England and see a very nice work in Bath about BIM and GIS and heritage aspect. I would like to ask you about, in terms of Monte Alegre, I think is the name of the city that you did the case study. Which kind of actions the city is doing in order to use this information that you are providing them in terms of BIM and GIS, they are using for maintenance or for thinking about new projects, for refurbishment? Can you explain a little bit the kind of application that the city can use or can take advantage from this application?
Yes, Diana, thank you for your question. Yeah, the main aiming of this work is to work with the students and give them skills to make a management plan based on BIM and GIS. Then this management plan is intended to be used by the community to make the decisions about the refurbishment and make rules that this district that is historical and protected by the Council of Defense maintain its historical characteristics. Then when we use the digital of 3D reality in local, we have the as is condition of this place. And this is very important to make any decision about the future of this asset, the asset that is in this district.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Heloisa. We are almost finished this session. I have two last questions to Fernanda. So Fernanda, congratulations. Do you think that the Brazilian construction companies are prepared for the mandatory implementation of BIM in design project in 2021?
Okay, this is out of scope.
Tricky question, I think.
It's out of scope of this study specifically. But I think yes, okay, because we had in Brazil a middle out diffusion of BIM, right? It was not top down at the beginning, so we have a lot of companies, specifically construction companies that already have expertise in this area to influence the chain, right? The others to develop projects, develop the design projects in BIM. So I think so, but it's not the scope of my work.
I know. Maybe I can ask Giuseppe the same question, but focus on the military sector. What do you think about this?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question is, do you think that the construction companies are prepared to implement mandates, to implement the BIM implementation, in fact, in Brazil? So I know that your area is military project. So what do you think about this?
Well, in my opinion, the companies are not very prepared because there are some difficulties. First of all, because they still think that BIM is only to use a certain software to make geometric models. BIM is much more than that. And the second is because it's a very expensive implementation still for some small and medium companies here in Brazil. Generally here where I work in the Brazilian Army, generally there's these constructions are for small and medium companies and construction companies. And I think that's it's a difficulty that we must to win in order to complete our BIM market implementation.
Okay. Any other question? I think all the presentations were very nice. I would like to thank you all for this brilliant session. I think we had the opportunity here to cover the topic of this session, BIM implementation, current practice and stage. So we could see how things are going in the UK, Holland, Germany, Brazil, Latin America. So I'm very glad to have the opportunity to see the work that you are doing. Thank you very much for all presenters, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Diana. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good afternoon, morning, or lunch.
Obrigado.